Right, welcome back. So May is Africa Month, and we're busy trying to share thoughts and ideas of how we can embrace our continent and our continental identity. And I said May 25 is Africa Day. 54 countries on the continent, and only 5 have it as a public holiday, and yet many celebrate Christmas and all sorts of other public holidays, which perhaps are not even our own originally. So, Minister, why on earth is it only 5 countries in Africa have a public holiday on Africa Day, which really speaks to what we're trying to do here?
Well, I think we are on the road to address that. If you look at our South Africa is one country which has many holidays. At the dawn of our democracy, we were so enthusiastic, as you would see our own constitution hailed throughout the world as this first world constitution, with addressing internally colonialism of a special type. I think that in the main consumed most of the energies as we were constructing and forming a new nation. To the extent that not many South Africans knew about Africa Day itself. That is why, as we conceived the Africa Month last year, we said it won't be enough to celebrate Africa Day because it's just that, a day. Let's put up a process which will conscientize South Africans about the importance of OAU as an organization, but also initiatives before that, to say, how do we then reconnect with the entire continent? Because that remains a key project which we need to embark upon. So I would really admit that South Africa, looking at its history, you know, the Pan-Africanist Congress in Ghana in 1962, for instance, the basis and the narrative in that Congress, as set out by the then President Nkrumah, was the basis borrowed from South Africa, borrowed from the assertion I'm an African speech by Pixley Isagaseme in 1906. So really, we do not have an excuse as South Africa, because we can't say that we don't know about Pan-Africanism. We championed it long before everybody spoke about it, long before Africa started the process of decolonization.
All right, quick thoughts. Is this an indictment on us that our continent is not celebrating Africa Day enough to get this Pan-African identity going?
I think it's because Africa doesn't know enough about itself.
Right.
I mean, the first thing, I don't know how many people think seriously about the language economics. How much does it cost you to learn isiZulu? It seems so natural.
Yeah.
Yet, if you put value on the language that you speak, and you know how to sell things in it. The missionaries didn't use their languages when they came to Africa. They learned African languages and sold their things to us in our languages. And yet, we spend our lives making sure that our children don't speak our languages, and we don't speak those languages. The kids who are dying in the Mediterranean are in fact denying the value of what they have, because when they go out there, they're not using what they've picked up. And if they have not picked up anything, where is that actionable knowledge that is going to renew Africa?
Okay. Professor Ntuli?
Yeah, not very long ago, I chaired the Ministerial Advisory Panel for Higher Education on the development of African languages. And when we asked the university bosses why, they said, no, we don't have any resources for it. We asked staff. Staff says, we are trying the best we can. So we asked the students. The student says, we are absolutely surprised. These people say we don't have dictionaries. We do not have encyclopedias for the language. How can they teach us? But we ask a question is that the Germans and the English, when they came in here and they translated the Bible, what lexicographers did they do? That means there's a certain kind of a laziness. Why we are not celebrating Africa is that we decolonized Africa, but what remained was coloniality. The state of mind that still remains entrapped, making us the photocopies of the Western world. And the call, therefore, of what the minister is pushing for the African Renaissance is a very simple program. Why can't Africa enter into a disobedience mode, disobey Western knowledge systems, disobey Western culture? It is by that disobedience that we can be able to reconstruct our Africa.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, on table number 5, we have Professor Mukle Nkondo. If we could get a microphone to you. I know that you've spoken widely on the African Renaissance, cultural charter, and I'm just wondering, how will this help us? Is there a need for an all-African approach on culture, in your view?
Oh, you took me by surprise.
Yes, that's what we do
thanks
here.
very much. Just one quick point. I really want just to commend the minister for the openness and the vision that he has. Quickly about the charter. What we should go back to acknowledge is the complex of policies, the laws, the structures that have been deployed in this country to manage these problems. There's a lot of work that has been done so far, particularly that this country has developed a national policy for IKS. That's the capacity that government has assembled. How does it solve that? It's important for us to acknowledge that culture is facing a problem of excessive dependence on Western knowledge and Western technologies. And what the Minister of Police is doing is that for the first time, let's begin a programmatic way of making sure that we affirm our own capacity to know, our own capacity to manage our politics in terms of our own capacity to know. So we are really breaking away from independence on European knowledge and European knowledge systems, and that's important. The problem we have, that in spite of the fact that we have all these policies, we still cannot prevent the Americanization of behavior and attitudes in the whole of Africa. That cultural dependence, that Americanization of our life is what the minister is trying to address. That's important for us to do that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Minister, there's a person called Rochelle, and I'm just looking by the surname, so I'm assuming that she's white. She's tweeted, and she says that the person that you're speaking to, Peter, right now does not recognize me as an African. What do we do with white people born on the continent that feel excluded?
Well,
can they claim to be African? Are they African? They want to be. They say they are. That's all they know is this continent.
well, I think people like to exclude themselves unnecessarily. Let's start at the beginning. Our constitution asserts that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. Now, this wanting assurance every time is not going to get us anywhere. People must get up off their seats and build Africa together with their fellow countrymen and women. That's what they must do. We cannot continue on this path that all the time you are asked, please assure me, please assure. No, nobody will assure you anything. Let us build a non-racial, non-sexist, united, and prosperous South Africa.
Okay.
Everybody has a role to do that.
All right.
I'm
Both
just
of you?
remembering the struggle for Haiti. There were Polish soldiers who fought with the Africans in Haiti, and they were recognized as honorary blacks. And after independence, they were part and parcel of Haiti as a nation. So it really depends on where your identity takes you in the area of actionable knowledge. This is my knowledge that I'm African. Therefore, whatever is being done in Africa, I would be part of it. And I will also be part of what my friend here calls that disobedience against Western imposition.
Okay, Professor Ntuli.
We have got Bram Fisher, we have got Joe Slovo, we have got Ruth First, even Paul Kruger in 1881. Paul Kruger said, I can say this with absolute confidence, whether we win or we lose, freedom shall always rise in Africa. Paul Kruger was an oppressor, but he had declared himself an African. Now to hear somebody at this stage to say I am actually excluded, it's a non-starter.
All right. But it's how they feel, and maybe that's what needs to be addressed. But as you say, you're saying that, look, we can't keep on reassuring you. You've just got to take your place at the table.
Look, we are in a process of forming a nation. There was no nation to talk about before 1994. And the call was made owing to our history. We reached 1994 because of the powerful narrative of non-racialism. People who didn't ask permission to be part and parcel of the liberation of this country. So nobody should seek permission from anybody. All what they need to do is to follow South African history, and when they follow South African history, they will realize that non-racialism has been part and parcel of the winning narrative. Okay. And they must come on board.
Okay. Table number 12, we'll find Carol Bauer. Your thoughts, Carol.
Hi, Peter. Good morning, everybody. But most importantly, Minister, thank you so much for allowing us to gather to talk about this. When we get invited to these breakfasts, normally it's in reaction to the budget. And obviously all of us are in business, so we want to come in and talk money, but this is all important. So I really salute you for gathering us all here today to talk about our African identity. In pursuance to that, I wanted to just support Professor Omotoso in saying that we cannot have a Pan-Africanism movement that denies us our own identity. I have to be able to be a Zulu girl, a Tswana girl, or whatever it is I am, in an environment that recognizes that I can claim my Africanism. And for those who feel that their hue, their color, excludes them from identifying as African, I think if a time comes where you're able to say, I'm going to put away that British passport that that allows my one leg to be on one continent and another in Africa, I think that is what's going to move people from feeling that they're not a part of an inclusive and cohesive South Africa. So I am not attacking white people. I am your daughter-in-law. I love you. but at the same time, I think that if you're going to be saying that you want to forge a nation in South Africa collectively with all of us who identify as African, maybe let's toss those other passports that we keep on using as a way to say, hey, if these blacks get it wrong, at least I can escape. We cannot have that. You have to help us get it right.
Okay, all right.
Peter, I'm sorry, I know you're limited on time, but I did also want to make a point about the fact that white people, the Freedom Charter says that we are all South African, we are all African. I also want to go back to the issue of languages. I'm guilty of not having learned my language properly, and I don't speak the best Sotho. But I do think that, Minister, perhaps you can provide guidance in this. In your social cohesion movement, which which is done annually, maybe an embracing of our own languages. We are all proficient in the English language, which is the language of the colonizers. But as Madiba said, if you speak to somebody in a foreign language, you speak to their mind. But the moment you speak to them in their own language, you connect with their hearts. So perhaps that's something that we can think about and embrace. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, Carol, thank you very much indeed. Just a quick reflection maybe on what you've heard, particularly the last bit, language.
Well, our erstwhile colonizers failed dismally to obliterate our indigenous languages. They still stand, they're still here. We are still learning even the foremost indigenous people's languages, the Khoi and the San. But we are running a danger. We are running to a very big problem now where we are participating in the obliteration of our languages. I make this example, Peter, that we send our children to former Model C schools. Perhaps there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is when I come to Peter's house and home, and Peter tells me that, look, Minister, Temba can't speak Zulu, you see. You must address him in English. And that problem is growing. And this is how we are participating in doing that which our colonizers couldn't achieve, in obliterating our own languages. Yes, your child must be fluent in other languages. Multilingualism is promoted, but you must know your indigenous language. You must know who you are.
Professor. You see, one of the fallacies of language is that minister une phone, Professor Ntuli une phone gazi. Right? This gazi in my phone means my phone is awesome, isn't it? At home, nginonkosi gazi, nginendota gazi, nginomalume gazi. And then we come up, we look at the word umfazi. The word umfazi is constructed out of two of the most powerful concepts in the world. The concept of knowledge and the concept of death. Ufa azi, because they know what they are living. And then they are the ones who are going to form Zenzele, Stockfell, and all of these things, while we say Woza 1, Woza 2. And yet, we end up with an idea that the man is the head of the family. Wait a minute.
All right.
You see, Peter, bear with me here. When you talk about knowledge in my language, it is ulwazi. 6 syllables, isn't it? What are the first 4 syllables? Ulwa. Z, knowledge. Ulwa, fight, peace. Knowledge is that which you have to fight for. That's what the language tells you. Or you say, qinisa. Qinisa, hold on to. Qinisela, persevere. Qinisega, be truthful. Iqiniso is that you must persevere for, be faithful to hold on to. The language tells you that's what we are shutting this cognitive language for our children.
Wow, okay. And I know we can have a whole conversation on that. So part of this African identity is actually that we need to be proud of things that are African. And I know that there's been a culture over the years that something that's imported is better, something that comes from other foreign lands is better. Often with raw materials used on the continent, somebody just stitches it together or puts it in a box and sends it back, and suddenly it's imported. But I've got to ask the question is, when our heads of state get sick, they fly to France, they fly to London. Is that not complicating that whole idea that we should be proud of our things, because you'll find Nigerian doctors there, you'll find Ghanaian doctors there, South African doctors there, in those hospitals that they run to.
Yeah. Well, it's true, and it has always been like that for time immemorial. But if you would check recently, African leaders really are so conscious about their own continent. You'll find most of them are treated in South Africa and elsewhere in the continent. It's a conscious decision they are making to undermine the development of the developed nations of the world, where people would be going out of the continent. But we've seen that, and we must recognize it, that if you would think of some of the heads of state recently would have been in South Africa, would have been elsewhere in the continent. We have not developed the infrastructure. What the leaders are talking about now, practically in the integration process, is how do we address what Professor Omodoso has been saying? How do we break these barriers through transportation, through telecommunication? How do we use ICT to break all these artificial boundaries, as it were? That is what is conscious in the minds of the leaders as they are talking about the building of infrastructure throughout the continent. Each country has been given a responsibility to lead in that particular aspect because of realizing of what you are talking about. It is an indictment that for you to get elsewhere in the continent, you have to fly first to Europe and then come back. You have to go to Paris and then come back to the continent. It's how the continent has been slowly developing. But as long as we still have the barriers, today you have EU, and one of the aspect you won't miss is the free flow, the free movement of people within the EU states. And this is what we are striving to as leaders of Africa. But as I say, our infrastructure development, what has happened in the past immediately after the independence, the dreaded structural adjustment program itself had its own contribution negatively. But it is a matter, it is a concern, and it is a matter which is being addressed by our leaders.
Okay, Professor Mthethwa, how do we deal with this self-hate? Because I find often, I go into a shop and the poor lady at the counter, she won't even look at me. She'll just say, plastic. She won't greet me. And yet, when a white person comes in, completely different experience happens. And I just wonder, what is it that it's going to take for us to get past the way we look at each other? It's easier for a black person to be harmful to another black person often, I get a sense. And I just wonder, how do we get over this? Because that's part of the journey, isn't it?
I think the day that we realize that we are rich, if you walked into one of these major shops in Paris or London, and you are an African millionaire, billionaire who's been listed in Forbes, I'm telling you, they'll close the shop for you during that period. It is because we're perceived as poor, and we perceive ourselves as poor, that we are treated as you would treat poor people. Material is the major division of the world. It's the first thing you see. We have all this in fables. A poor person appears at your door, and you kick them off. That person comes back, decked in rich dress, and please come in, So it is a perception. And of course the person says, I'm not coming in because I was the same person who came here, and you saw me in rags, and you kicked me off. That perception can only be made through serious propaganda that we are not poor. It doesn't matter what we wear, what we say, or how we speak, that person as a human being is basically enriched by their personality and by being African. It's the only way. It is so basic, and we need to propagandize for it. It doesn't come naturally.
Okay. Professor Ntuli?
When I was in the township, when people were this craze of neglecting people, my neighbor's child caught his own dog and put in a tire and was going to put in petrol. I said, why are you burning this dog? It's your dog. He says, when I call the other dogs, they don't come. This one comes. So you can actually see the fact that the target that is actually in you, the one that actually touched, that is actually you, that is the one that reacts like that, which actually means to say that there is a kind of a psychosis of self-loathing that we need to do. So that when you speak about a cultural renaissance, what is it that needs to be, reborn? If we do not know what is it that should make us actually proud, then we are not going to be able to accept. I'll just give one example. According to the Dogon people, Ama, the sky god, took a paw. A paw is an invisible seed, divided it into 4 clavicles, took one of the clavicles and shook this clavicle. It vibrated, producing 7 vibrations. Out of those vibrations, matter and galaxy were born. Hundreds of years, it's in the manuscripts. Only in 1970, Europe says the string theory in physics, matter started with a vibration actually of it. But we have not yet even gone back to ask ourselves as to whether, when we say Africa Renaissance, what is there in a sense to be born? Right. What made the people of West Africa know that there was a Sirius B long before the telescopes were there? What Penny Pansy was saying, the knowledge started here. Everything actually started here. We don't know. That's why when Peter comes in here, I'm going to say, Peter, I've got nothing, because I expect Peter to ask for something.
Okay. All right. Unfortunately, and this happens all the time, we run out of time very quickly. But I want to thank you, my guests, for starting us on this journey. #WeAreAfrica is something that we really need to embrace this month. Learn about each other and embrace our Pan-African identity and experience it and share it with people around you. Ladies and gentlemen, my great pleasure to say thank you to the Honourable Minister of Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Professor Kole Otomoso, novelist, playwright, academic, critic, and the Yebo man. Thank you very much indeed. And Professor Pitika Ntuli, also renowned sculptor, poet, academic. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us and leading us in this discussion. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. And I just want to invite you to join us. I think next week we're going to be chatting housing. So that's something to look forward to. But in the meantime, please, Africa, and #WeAreAfrica, go and spread the gospel about us being Africans. Have a great day, everybody, as we say goodbye from Cape Town. Bye-bye.